Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Jen. I grew up in South Africa, spent 11 years in England and have now been living in New Zealand since 2011. I absolutely love it here. I'm a citizen now and I just feel it's such a privilege to live in New Zealand. I do have a range of videos about moving to New Zealand, which I will link the playlist over here, and I also have a Facebook group on the same topic, which I will link down below, so do check that out if you are planning on moving here in the future. I would suggest, if you are requesting to join my group, answer the questions and do mention that you've come through my channel, and your request will be approved much more easily than if you don't. In today's video, I want to talk about 5 things that you won't find in New Zealand. And the first thing is 24-hour supermarkets. Now, there may be one, possibly more than one, in Auckland. I couldn't find evidence of any except maybe one in Te Atatu, but it's just not something you're going to find widely in New Zealand. When we lived in England, when we had our first baby and he was sleepless in the night, we would find ourselves driving him to get him to sleep, and we would drive to Tesco and maybe pick up a couple of groceries or things that we needed at like 3 in the morning because we could. Or if you work shifts, you can go and do your grocery shopping after work, but in New Zealand that's not going to be possible. You might be lucky to find a supermarket near you, especially if you live in Auckland, that has hours maybe from 6 AM till midnight, but 24-hour supermarkets or other shops are just not a thing here. The second thing that you won't find in New Zealand is people carrying guns. Even the police don't routinely carry guns. I do get questions about this sometimes through my channel and also in my Facebook group about whether or not people moving from the US here can bring their guns with them, and I'll read you what it says in the firearms control legislation and policy, which I will also link down below. It says there is no right to own or possess firearms under New Zealand law, including for the purposes of self-defense. The current legal regime for firearms can be characterized as a licensing but no registration system, since the majority of firearms in the country do not need to be registered. And then they specifically mention the legislation provides that it is an offence subject to a fine of up to 5,000 New Zealand dollars and or imprisonment of up to 4 years to carry or be in possession of any firearm, airgun, pistol, restricted weapon or explosive, except for some lawful, proper and sufficient purpose. Carrying or possessing firearms or ammunition in a public place without a lawful purpose carries the same penalties. A similar provision with a lesser penalty applies with respect to carrying an imitation firearm. It is also an offence to carry a loaded firearm in a motor vehicle. As I mentioned, I lived in South Africa up until I was 24, and the way things are there and the level of crime, we did have a gun, and Grant, my husband, routinely carried his gun with him. So that's just not something you're going to find here. There's no need for it either, because New Zealand is a very safe country, but if you have questions about bringing guns here or wanting to own or carry a gun, there's your answer, and like I said, do check out the link down below for more information. The third thing that you won't find in New Zealand is snakes. There are no snakes in New Zealand, which is great news if you enjoy being out in nature, and they call it tramping here, or hiking in the bush. You're not going to have to worry about coming across snakes. I did want to double check my facts before making this video, and I did find out that there are sea snakes or sea kraits, which are considered native, but they are actually visitors, and they are occasionally seen in the sea, and it horrified me. And the information I found I will link down below, and it says sea snakes and kraits are highly venomous, but as they are docile creatures, there is no record of anyone in New Zealand being bitten. Nevertheless, if I was swimming in the ocean and came across one, I would be walking on water back to the beach. So that just horrified me, and I hope I never come across one. And it doesn't seem likely, considering that maybe 6 to 10 are spotted a year in like certain areas that are not areas I go, but there you go. But there's no snakes on land in New Zealand. The fourth thing that you won't find in New Zealand are Ikea stores, and it breaks my heart to say that. We do get importers bringing in Ikea products. There are a few websites such as Idea and Urban Sales and similar, and you can buy them through Trade Me, which is our equivalent of eBay, and you can also place orders for them for particular products that maybe they don't carry as standard, but they will bring in from Ikea for you. However, it does work out to be a lot more expensive, and obviously there's a longer wait time and it's a bit more hassle. For me, one of the appeals of Ikea is that it is inexpensive but decent quality for the price. And when you add in the import fee and all of the things involved in getting IKEA products in New Zealand, the inexpensive part of it kind of falls by the wayside. I wanted some Billy bookcases. Well, I inquired about some a few years ago. I wanted a tall one with 2 doors, which in England at the time would have cost me £80, and they wanted to charge me $700 to import one, and so I could order it through one of these sites. And I was like, if I'm spending $700 on a bookcase, it's not going to be chipboard from IKEA, it's going to be solid wood. So it is a bit sad that we don't have IKEA. However, IKEA did announce earlier this year or end of last year that they will be coming to New Zealand, and they're planning a store in Auckland, but then COVID happened, so I don't know when that's actually going to happen, if that's even still going to happen. But as of now, there is no IKEA store in New Zealand. And then the last thing that you won't find in New Zealand are extensive public transport networks. I filmed a video that is one of my most watched videos of all time on my YouTube channel, and it's called Pros and Cons of Living in New Zealand, and I mentioned as one of the cons that we have a lack of public transport. And I get lots of comments on there going, I live in Wellington and we have buses and trains and all these things, and I live in Auckland. That's great. If you live in that area, you can perhaps access public transport in that area. But what I'm talking about is I can't get a train from here to Wellington. There's no transport networks. There may be public transport in certain areas, but for example, my nearest big city is New Plymouth. It's not even that big, but my nearest city is New Plymouth, and there isn't public transport for me to get there except for a bus that leaves at 6:20 every morning. That's it. There's one bus going to New Plymouth, and it comes back at 4:30 in the afternoon, and it takes over 2 hours, whereas if I drove there it takes an hour. So I can't just decide mid-morning I need to get a bus to New Plymouth, do some shopping and come back, or attend an appointment or whatever. That's just not possible. Also, once you get to New Plymouth, it's not really the type of city that you could kind of just walk to all of the areas. You need a car to drive around, and there isn't public transport to take you from, I guess, the bus terminus to wherever your appointment is. So that's what I'm talking about when I mention a lack of public transport. There's no trains in my area. Even in Auckland, not all of the public transport is available to all of the areas. Obviously, I'm comparing this to when we lived in England and there was much better public transport than you can find here. Of course, it makes sense. It's a much higher population there, and that kind of infrastructure is just going to come with that. So it's not a complaint, but I'm just making you aware that if you are moving to New Zealand, you are more than likely going to need a car because there are no extensive public transport networks in the country. So I hope you found this video interesting and or helpful. If you do plan to move to New Zealand at some point, or you're considering it, do check out my playlist, which I will link at the end of this video, and also my Facebook group. Things are kind of sticky at the moment because the borders are closed, but hopefully that won't be forever. Of course, your first place to check out what your visa options are is always going to be the immigration website, which I will link down below. If you want professional help with your visa or your options for moving to New Zealand, I would recommend New Zealand Shores. They're a sponsor in my Facebook group. If you're wanting to make the move here and you work in a medical field, they are the only people that the border is open to. They're considered critical workers, so I would recommend getting in touch with Accent Health Recruitment. I will also link them down below, so check all of that out if you are wanting to move to paradise, which is what I consider New Zealand. So I think that's plenty of things to be linking, and I hope this video is helpful. I hope some of those links are helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.